Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fam Sports New York Varsity. I'm your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. It's been one of those long nights. I'm already struggling. But this is our team preview show for Section 1AA, where we talk about each team and highlight them briefly, the players coming back and kind of their situation. And we want to welcome our audience. We appreciate you guys tuning in, like always. And if you're new to this, we cover Section 1 football. We break down the teams, talk about the games. Make sure you guys follow us on all our social media accounts, which you can see on the screen. And how the show is going to work is we'll go over all the teams, and then we're going to give bold predictions. I'm going to give bold predictions at the end, and Mars is going to buy or sell them to the audience. And we'll try to have some fun. But before we get started, make sure you guys check out our website. You can get all our content there at famsportsny.com. Again, access all our content. I know there were some inquiries about donations or merchandise. You can buy our merchandise from the website. You can donate, and we appreciate any donations that anybody gives. That always goes back to the show. So we would always appreciate that. And, you know, a couple disclaimers on the team previews, Mars. We're going to talk about projected starters, but projected starters are what we see on tape from the spring team and when we talk to the coaches. And we didn't talk to all the coaches. So again, projected starters doesn't mean that these people are guaranteed jobs, right? The people, they've been practicing the last 2 weeks. We even had a team play in Ossining tonight, right? And I'm going to go back and rewatch the game after the show. But, you know, like, again, these are just projected, but we're going to talk about some of the players that we caught our eye on tape and what the coaches talked about. And if we don't mention your name, it doesn't mean we don't like your game, right? I think if we don't say your name, it would motivate you, right, to say they should have said my name, and I'm going to prove why, right? So let's get into it, Mars, and let's just talk with the league overall. The league is a little bit different. There's 3 leagues, A, B, and C, and there's 8 playoff teams, and 2 of them come from A, the top 2. The top 4 come from League B, and then the final 2 come from League C, the top 2. And if you want to see how the standings look and how the tiebreakers work, Kevin Devaney did a really good job on his bracketology page on kdjblog.com. Check it out. He does a really good job talking about how the playoff system works and how this show is going to work, Mars. We're going to start with League A, then go to B, and then C. So let's start it off, Mars, and let's start with the defending champs back from 2019, New Rochelle. And again, it's coached by Coach Ray Rett in his second season. In 2020, they went 5-1. Everyone talks about the loss to Suffern. They still had a pretty darn good year, right? They're the 5-time defending straight Section 1 champions. They're also the defending state champs, right, from 2019, because we didn't have one in the spring. So again, we're still talking, you know, everyone thinks New Rochelle is done. I'm not sure about that, Mars, but they do have to replace a lot of guys. This is going to be one of the youngest teams that New Rochelle has. 1 out of the 11 on offensive starters are coming back, and that 1 starter is on the offensive line. They lose their quarterback, and they lost some studs like Jennings, Phillips on the offensive line, King. Defensively, Mars, 0 out of the 11 coming back. There were some rotational guys that saw some experience, but none bona fide starters. And they lost when you talk about Irizarry, Gregory, Massey, Caden Smith, again, Jennings, Phillips. That's a lot of guys, and Coach talked about it. It's going to be an inexperienced team, new faces, but they are athletic, and they want to get them to be consistent. And I think New Rochelle has some of the best athletes in 1AA. And let's go a couple names. To me, it starts at the quarterback spot. Austin Luzzi, the junior. He had a really good offseason. There's a tall guy, 6'4", 185 pounds, long athlete, solid arm. And he's got a couple skill guys. My first one is Sean Santiago, wide receiver in DB. Transfer. I think he's going to be the breakout player. He's a senior, Mars. He's 5'10", 165 pounds. Really solid route runner. You can see the work he put in with Prospect NYS, who also raved about him to me. But I watched some of his tape. This is a guy who's going to create separation with his route running, and he could be an X factor for this offense. Another guy who spews athleticism is Nico Andrews, the junior. This kid's 6'2", multi-sport athlete. He's got the tools to be a dominant athlete. He played some defensive back in the spring. But let's talk about a couple linemen, because this is going to be a big deal. The linemen are going to help dictate how good New Rochelle can be. Starts with the 1 returning offensive starter, Frank Gagliardo. He was our Frank's finest. He's going to have to anchor that offensive line, another 6'4", big kid. And Deshaun Benitez, the junior. He played offensive line. He played defensive tackle. This kid's 6 feet, 290 pounds, two-way lineman. And just a couple other guys. We got a young man in Braga who was an edge defender, 6'3", 200 pounds. And to me, one of the Frank's finest and underrated, I think he's going to really pop off this season, inside linebacker and tight end Chris Tuck. I mentioned him on the Frank's Finest show. Won't go too deep, but Coach has raved about his work and his effort in the spring. And another guy to round it all off in the defensive back, Jabari Clark. This kid, 6 feet, another kid who had a really good summer. Not a lot of experience, Mars, but the athleticism is going to be there. My biggest question mark is on this offensive line and the linebacking core, who have to replace a lot of dudes. But watch out for this pass attack, Mars. I think it could be a pretty potent one. Let's go to another team, and I'll pass off to you, Mars. Mount Vernon. And Mount Vernon is back from the Independent League into AA, coached by Mark Murray. And in 2020, they had a pretty solid season. Or I keep saying 2020, but it's the spring season when I refer to it, just so the audience understands. They went 3-2, and they lost to Ossining in the Independent Championship. And, on the offensive line, they're bringing back 3 or 4 of their starters from the spring season. Now they lose Jalen Bennett, who was a really good running back for them, but they have some bulk up front coming, and I'll talk about a couple of them. Defensive end and offensive lineman Nazir John, the junior, 6'2". He made some really dominant plays in the Independent League. Had a couple defensive touchdowns where he just ripped the ball out of offensive players' hands and took it to the house. But to me, another guy, defensive tackle and offensive lineman Darren Sloan Jr., 6'1", 300 pounds. This guy is a mountain, big boy. He is kind of a boulder, hard to move. But my breakout player, Amari Hart, 6'4", 245 pounds, defensive and offensive lineman. This kid was really raw, but if he can work on that technique, I watched him at the Carmel Lineman Challenge. This was a tall figure who can move around. He's someone I'm interested to see. And then a couple of other guys, right, non-linemen. Jaden Gary. He was a running back, wide receiver, strong safety for them, shifty guy. Can he help take on that offensive load left by Bennett? There's going to be somebody, I think, who did pretty solid running to the outside. And finally, Ibrahim Conte, linebacker and tight end, 5'8", 190 pounds. He really packs a punch when he hits you, and this was a very active defender. He swarms to the ball. These are some of the names. And to me, I'm looking to see, can Mount Vernon compete? It's going to be tough. Again, you're going from independent league to AA. It's a big jump, right? How competitive can they be in this league is going to be something I'm interested to see. Mars, what do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about New Rochelle. I mean, it's actually very interesting when you look at them, right? Granted, I think that, like I said, we keep talking about projected starters that are returning, and New Rochelle doesn't have a lot of them. I mean, 1 out of the 11 on offense, 0 out of the 11 on defense, and I think that it's interesting because normally when you get a projection of who's returning, who's not, usually when a team doesn't have a lot of returning players, you're concerned. You're thinking to yourself, that means they're not going to have a lot of veteran talent. They're not going to have a lot of chemistry because these might be all new players stepping into these roles. But New Rochelle is one of those programs that they always lose a lot of talent. Yeah, they always do. But then the
they
new
filter
guy
in more talent,
and they walk right in. They're fine. Yeah. So the point is that as much as that stat, that projection could be very, very nerve-wracking if you're a Huguenot, right? But I wouldn't be concerned. I think New Rochelle is a good program, and they consistently win all the time.
I think they got good dudes coaching them.
Yeah, the great coaching staff, and I think that's going to be something that I wouldn't have to worry about. As you mentioned, they have a lot of talent. Even if a lot of guys left, it's really going to be my focus on Sean Santiago. I think that he's a guy that is going to be crucial to the success here. And I think that a lot of these other guys on New Rochelle are going to be cogs in this machine.
And they have young guys, so it's not going to be easy, but this feels like the first time in a very, very long time that New Rochelle feels like an underdog.
Yeah.
When was the last time we could say that?
I think, listen, Suffern had an awesome team. And that
we'll get to that. Yeah,
that game was very interesting, to say the least. And a lot of people did not expect that. I know that you called Suffern to be a top-tier team in the spring. And I know that. And not a lot of people thought the same way that you did. And they exactly ended up being like that. So I think that
shot myself in the foot because I didn't pick something to win that game.
Win that game. But the point is that because of the fact that New Rochelle lost, people start to doubt that New Rochelle is the same machine. But let's not forget they're still the state defending champions.
Lee Corso, not so fast, my friends.
Yeah, I mean let's wait and see what happens.
Let's go to another team again. Let's go to Yonkers Force, and this is a new coach, Coach Anthony Fava. First season, he was the Woodlands coach. In 2020, they were 1-1. Was hit with COVID pretty hard, so they didn't play many games. But they did win over their big rival, Brave. And again, I didn't get to speak to the coach. It's been tough with the shortened off season, so I understand some of the coaches not getting back. But some of the players to watch to me, I'm going to start at the quarterback spot, Mars. Alvin Martinez, the junior, 5'10", 190 pounds. I saw some reps versus New Rochelle. You're going to see a lot of spread concepts in this offense. He's going to be an important guy, not just throwing the ball, but running the ball. He's going to have to be very active. To me, we look at our offensive line, right? Kadir Holmes is going to be big. He's a Frank's finest on the offensive line. Really strong finisher, one of the better centers. And you know you love your centers, Mars. But another guy, Philip Knowles, 5'9", offensive tackle, defensive lineman, going to be another important guy. Line play is going to be big in Double-A, and those two guys are going to have to lead the way. And one more guy, Brandon Sweat, wide receiver and outside linebacker, the senior, 5'11". I like some of the highlights I saw of his summer tape. He was a guy who was getting open and was becoming a reliable target, and he's going to have a big role. Again, this is going to be big. The biggest question mark, watching the quarterback and the backs, you do lose a bunch of guys. I'm interested to see how they come together. Another team are Scarsdale. Scarsdale's in this division. 2020, they went 3-2. They have been over 5. This has been a steady program that, again, over 500, 8 of the last 11 years, but they have been 4 years without a playoff berth. So they're trying to get back into the playoff standings. I didn't get to speak to Coach. I don't have the projected offensive and defensive starters coming back, but I'm going to tell you some of the players to watch. They did lose a couple good guys, right? So you talk about their fullback quarterback Miller, which is a big loss. He was a big stud player for them in the spring. Noah Ebner-Boris, those are two really good players. But if you look at some of the guys, they have some talent coming back. Julian Glantz leads the way at linebacker and running back. He was a Frank's finest, 6 feet, 185 pounds, a really talented two-way player, 3-down linebacker who's going to anchor that defense. And another guy who's underrated to me, defensive lineman and tight end Ryan Cahaley, the senior. This kid, 6'2", 210 pounds, was really disruptive in the spring and was a force for this team. It doesn't get enough talk. Another guy, a guy got significant reps in the spring, Nick Freyhoffner, the senior. Safety Ethan Lowy, the senior. This kid's 6 feet, 170 pounds. He also got some significant reps. You can see they're bringing back some defenders. And this was a defense, Mars, that was number 1 in Double-A. So again, they do have to replace some guys, but they are bringing back some guys as well. A question that I have is on the offensive side where they run the option, and a lot of people are raving about this next young man who could be an X factor, Mars, quarterback Brian Nichols, who he's one of the better hockey players in the area. This kid's 6 feet. They think he could be a stud player at the quarterback spot. He could be an X factor if he could play big time. That brings a dynamic to this Scarsdale team where you see some defenders coming back, and now they can have a nice little punch on the offense. And I got to wrap it up with a kicker, Mars. Bennett Abe, he's one of the best kickers in 1AA. He's going to college to play, to kick. This is a really good kicker, and again, kicking is a weapon when you have one, and teams who don't have one wish they do. Mars, which team do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about Scarsdale. I feel like when you think, most of the time, New Rochelle and Scarsdale are always in the same division, if you haven't noticed. And I think that Scarsdale has always been that second team that's been consistently winning in the divisions, and obviously New Rochelle's been dominating the division, but I feel like Scarsdale's been a consistent program, and I think that they are, in the right spot to do that again. And I know that the playoff system's a little bit different this year when it comes to...
Two teams out of this league.
This is just 2 teams out of this league.
We still have a couple more teams to talk about.
And I think that they're the favorites to be, well, at least one of those teams. And
hold up bold predictions, man.
I'm just saying, because if I'm looking back at history, I think Scarsdale and New Rochelle have always been the 2 teams from this conference.
Well, the divisions always seem to change.
They do slightly, but it feels like always, all the time, Scarsdale and New Rochelle have always somehow fallen into the same division. And I feel like Scarsdale is a team that's been consistently doing well.
Yep, 8 out of 11 years over 500.
Yeah, and I think that they have some weapons to them that will give them an edge in a lot of these close games. And I think that you kind of have to like the way this team looks. I mean, Brian Nichols at quarterback, and I think this,
again, junior, young guy, so we're going to see, but people are excited about him.
Yep. They think that they rave about him, and I think, having this excitement with your team only leads to positive, right? In my opinion, I feel like this positivity around Scarsdale gives them a kind of a good outlook for the season. I think they're ready to prove that they can win against New Rochelle, especially a New Rochelle team which a lot of people are doubting right now. So I think that they believe that this is probably their best chance to step in and maybe they lead the division instead of New Rochelle that usually does. You got to wait and see.
I'm a big Julian Glantz guy. I think he's a really good player in 1AA. Let's go to another team, Mamaroneck Mars, coached by Anthony Vitti. And in 2020, they went 2-3. Really injury-riddled season. I mean, they had a bunch of dudes go down, and it was hard to come back from. Offensively, I thought they were pretty darn good. They averaged 23.6 points in the spring march, which was 6th out of the 14 teams. They had 2 games over 30 points, but turnovers were just too much offensively. They definitely want to correct that. And defensively, they gave up too many points. Their defense was ranked 11th out of 14 in points allowed. When you look on the offense, they are bringing some guys back. 5 of the 11 offensive starters, Mars, 3 on the offensive line. They do have to replace their quarterback. They lost some studs in Jack Benton and their quarterback Grant Malice. Defensively, 5 of the 11 coming back as well, but they lost some guys there too. Alex Verney was really solid for them in the spring. Paul Fuller, Brian Albert. So there's going to be some talent that they're going to have to replace. But when you look at it, players to watch, I'm looking at first at the quarterback battle, Mars. They had 3 junior quarterbacks going at it. I'm excited to see who comes out on top. One guy who was one of the favorites is Jason Cox, the junior. Coach talked about him being a guy that has separated himself. Another guy got to talk about in this offense, running back and defensive lineman, Longezo Sandra, Marsa Frank's finest. That this guy is he was a real reliable presence in the spring, especially with all those injuries. Shifty runner who can also run through contact and catch the ball out of the backfield. Going to be huge to get this guy going. And let's talk about some linemen, Mars. Ben Dutton, 6 feet, 220 pounds, a senior. Tim Sommer, 6'3", 265 pounds. And again, you're going to need the offensive line to open up holes because I think this rush attack could be pretty darn solid if they can open up holes. And let's go to the defense. Linebacker and running back, Will Paneros, the senior, 5'10", 175 pounds. Really, I thought he was a really solid active linebacker, a reliable tackler. He showed some games where he was constantly in on the ball, but again, it's about, continue to be consistent because too many times you saw too many missed tackles, giving up too many big plays, but he was one of the more consistent defenders. And to me, the biggest question is the cohesion on that offensive line. Can they develop that defensive line in secondary? I mentioned some of those guys that they lost on that D-line were studs. How do they replace them? But what I'm looking for, I think this rush attack, if they can get the offensive line cohesion good, this rush attack could be pretty good. That's my thought on it. Let's go to another team, March, Yonkers Brave. And in 2020 was another tough year. We got a COVID, injuries. They did go 0-4. And the Yonkers teams is going to be a slow build. I mean, let's just call it, they're in tough circumstances when it's from the Catholic leagues or, participation. It's not an easy feat. But again, I think Coach Chiappa has done a solid job, and he's going to try to continue to build there. And again, we didn't get to speak to Coach about his projected starters, but they are returning their quarterback. You do lose Williams. You do lose Needham on offense. Defensively, Brandon Kane was really solid for them, and it's going to be hard to replace him. But, 2 guys that I'm looking at DJ Holmes at the quarterback spot. It was really raw, too many turnovers, but this is an athletic kid, and I think more reps he got, more seasoned he can be, and he can be somebody in that triple option that is dangerous. And another guy, Manny Romero, running back and defensive back, really active player. I thought he made some really solid plays against Yonkers Force. Again, limited amount of games. But, to me, the biggest question mark is the defense. Coach Chiappa talks about he comes from Nerd Shell. Defense is a big component for them. How does the defense going to look replacing a guy, some of the players, including Brandon Keene. And I think the triple option offense will look better. Again, the multiple years that they're in the system, the JV system using it, I think it can be slowly built, Mars. But what team do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about Mamaroneck. And I think if you're looking at the top teams, it's always been Scarsdale and Nurshell, but Mamaroneck's always been that competitive team that's always been right there with them. And in previous years, now last year was a little tough because of injuries and things like that. And in 2019 they went 1-8. But in 2018, they went 7-2.
Yep.
And I think that it's just been a 2-year slump that is definitely, I think, can change. I think that they're starting to kind of have some cohesion. I think that you look at this projected starters, you're going to have 5 of the 11 on offense. 3 of the 5 of them are offensive linemen, and then 5 of the 11 on defense. I think the more veteran presence you have, the higher chance of you being able to bounce back from adversity. And I think that's what Mamaroneck is looking to do, is they've been through a tough spot. but now they have to come together and kind of bounce.
And when
back.
you have a young quarterback, what's good to have is some linemen who can block in a running game, and that will really help.
And I was going to get to that next point, is that if you can develop this offensive line so that they can be a stable, protective force for this young quarterback and allow him to, instead of him having to throw on all these downs, you have a kind of controlling the pace of the game. Run the ball, right? Control the time of possession. So now it kind of benefits not even just the use of play action pass, but it kind of gives you a lot of other opportunities.
Yeah, and again, offensively they were strong in the spring, but again, too many points defensively was a big problem, and turnovers. Let's go to League B, Marcin. League B again is going to have 4 playoff teams out of this group, and let's start with Clark's down south, Mars. Moving back into AA, coached by Mike Scarpelli, who's been there for a while now. In 2020, they were 5-1, and this team is a program that is not talked about enough, Mars. They have been a very steady program. They've had 3 or less losses for 7 straight years, Mars. 1 loss 2 out of the 3 past seasons. This program is not talked about enough. And again, I didn't get to speak to Coach about the projected starters coming back. They do lose some talent, and offensively, you're losing your quarterback in Rodan, you're losing your running back Mariah, you're losing a couple wide receivers in Gleitzia, Martins. On the defensive side, you lose a guy like Spiegel, you lose the linebackers Mariahs. They're losing about 32 seniors, Mars. There's going to a lot of turn, but they are bringing back some good players. And let's start with Jack Ryan, the junior. Offensive lineman, defensive lineman. He was a Frank's finest on the offensive side of the ball. This guy, 6'3", 6'4", 240 pounds. Really strong kid. He can really be an anchor for this offensive line. And another Frank's finest to me, strong safety, Cooper Crisp. This is a productive playmaker on defense, a slippery guy, right? He's not the most physically dominant guy, but he just makes plays, and they're going to rely on him big time. Another guy is outside linebacker and fullback Joey LaRosa. This is a good contained guy in the run game, very active defender, was a reliable tackler. And then another defensive end. So we got a defensive end, Thomas May, the senior, 6'2", 210, solid pass rusher. He was pretty solid at the point of attack. I named a couple defenders after Jack Ryan, who also is going to be on the D-line, Mars. You can kind of tell, right? Defense is going to be really important for this Clark South, and I think they have the talent. But if you go to the wide receiver spot, I think wide receiver and cornerback, Colin Kapala, the junior, not a tall guy. He rotated on offense and special teams, but he's a shifty player. He's going to have to take a big role and kind of fill in the role that Gleitzia left. And another defensive lineman, offensive lineman, Tim Sommerlin, Jr., 6'1", 270 pounds, rotated reps at the defensive tackle. Can he step up? Can he be a guy that takes over? And again, there'll be names that I didn't mention that are going to have to step up. And finally, to wrap it all up, Evan Greenbush, inside linebacker. Can he help fill that void that the Mariahs left? I thought he did a decent job, and I saw some of the summer tape, and he's going to have to be a big guy to help fill that void. Again, there's some people I probably didn't even name. Right, they're going to have to step up. You lose 32 seniors. That means there's a lot of opportunity for people. And when you lose your quarterback, running back, wide receiver, how do you replace all those guys and inside linebacker? So that's my biggest question mark. But what I'm looking for, this program has been churning out multiple years of success. And can they continue to do that? I think they can. Another team let's talk about, Spring Valley, coached by Andrew Delva, who's done a pretty good job with them. In 2020, they went 3-3. Started off the season really well, but when they played Somers, they lost like a boatload of players due to injury. But they have been 500 or better for 3 straight years, Mars, for the first time in over 17 years, which tells you the job the program and the staff has done there. But they graduated a lot of players. There's another team that's going to be very inexperienced, Mars, offensively. 1 out of the 11 starters coming back. None on the offensive line. They lose their quarterback. They lost their top 3 rushers. Defensively, only 1 out of the 11 coming back. And they lose guys like Martinez, Duncan, Brunot. There's a lot of people there and a lot of talent they have to replace. But Coach talked about they're young, they're athletic, they're going to be aggressive on defense, and they're going to be up-tempo on offense. So they're going to really test you with their speed. And a couple guys to look out for. The biggest one to me is, I think, their best player, cornerback and wide receiver, Mark Toussaint. Frank's finest cornerback, one of the most explosive players and one of the best tackling defensive backs that they have. He's going to carry a big load for this team, but I think he's a guy who can handle it. A couple other guys. How about quarterback Jaden Scott, the junior? Coaches love the work he's put in. He's gotten stronger. He's improved in his release, his decision-making. They think he can have a good year. Another guy, Jaden Griffin. Another guy who's had a really good offseason that Coach talked about. And then cornerback Nick Peters, 6'1", 160 pounds. He rotated on the defensive end. And then an offensive lineman is Wild Pierre. Again, another guy who rotated, but these are not starters, right? These are guys who are going to have to pick up a big-time role outside of Mark Toussaint. And we're going to see if they can handle it. But they're young and athletic. And my biggest question mark is on the offensive line and defensive line, because when you got to replace all 5 on the offensive line and all 4 on the defensive line, there's a lot of cohesion that has to go into that. So that's going to be really tough. But I'm looking, there's a lot of opportunity. I think somebody's going to have to pick it up. Mars, what team do you want to talk about?
I'm going to talk about Clarkstown South. And I think that, and you mentioned this before, that they've been a consistent program. I feel like, even back when we used to play, South was
feels like a long time ago.
But yeah, South has always been consistently good, and I think that you have to applaud them because, especially with how they reclass a lot of these teams, they've been bouncing up and down from AA to A, and
they went to A. They went to A for a few years and had a lot of success, and now they got to get pushed back up into AA. Same thing with Spring Valley.
The thing is that they've been very competitive, even with that happening. A lot of schools usually can't handle.
Tough.
They can't handle being moved up with the bigger schools, and then after they've been dropped down, and they've been competing with schools close to their size. So I think that you have to really applaud South for being able to do all that. And same thing was, like you said, Spring Valley's the same situation.
Yep.
But the big difference between, I'd say, for Spring Valley and what I think of South this year is that Spring Valley has such a young team.
Yes.
Right? And I'll go with the fact that I think South has a little bit more veteran presence to them, and I can say that this is going to be led by guys like Jack Ryan at the offensive line. Cooper Crisp is just a playmaker on the defense, and I think both those guys are going to be followed by a lot of very not veteran talent, but I think more of reliable talent, that they have enough cohesion, enough chemistry that I think they'll be all right. And I'm not saying that Spring Valley won't be all right. I just think that South has, I think, more veteran presence, and that's usually bodes more success. And I think that South, I think, is going to be in a very interesting team this year, especially in a very competitive league that they're in.
Yeah. Let's go to another team. Again, this is a really competitive league, and let's just keep moving. Let's go to Carmel Rams, and coached by Todd Kay. In 2020, they went 5-1. And before the COVID season, before the shortened season, Mars, they won 6 or more games 5 straight years. The last 3 years, Mars, their record is 19-6. This has been some nice run that Carmel has gone on the last couple seasons, and they had the number 1 offense in the spring in AA and the number 2 defense in AA, and this was a young team, and they're bringing back a lot of guys, Mars, who either started or rotated. And if on the offensive side of the ball, 10 of the 11 starters coming back, Mars, all 5 offensive linemen, including their quarterback, in that group. That's a lot of dudes. And on defensively, Mars, 8 of the 11 on the defensive side. And Coach talked about this offense. He wants to spread the ball around. He knows he has playmakers all around. He wants to feed a lot of different people, and he thinks it'll put a lot of pressure on defenses to guard a lot of different guys. And defensively, they talk about just being disciplined. They want to fly to the ball and tackle, right? They don't do a lot of complex things that do put in wrinkles, but they just want you to be aggressive. They want you to fly to the ball and make plays. And the players to watch, Mars, they have a list. And it starts, to me, with the quarterback, Kevin Dahl, dual threat guy, explosive, dangerous on rollouts. I watched one of his practices in person, and this is a guy who, if he can continue work on his accuracy and decision making, could be a dynamic player in their offense. I got to talk about Josh Massey, the running back. This guy, Frank's Finest, he's a bull. Great balance. We talked about him on the Frank's Finest show, the ability to run through contact. A couple of the wide receivers, Mars, Andrew Fiore, another Frank's Finest guy, big body target. Going to be a reliable, good route runner. Nick DeLeo is someone they talk about has been stepping up at practice, tall and long receiver, another big body guy. And then a guy in the slot. How about the coach's son, Mars Trevor Kay? Shifty slot receiver, and he was a guy I saw at practice too. But let's talk about the linemen, Mars, because that's going to be the big thing. If Carmel, which is the goal has got to be this year, that they want to compete for a section title, it's got to be up front, right? And guys like Anthony Bryant, Owen Boland, Scott Danvin, these are guys that are going to have to lead the way offensively, and they're going to have to dictate. Another guy, Dom Telesco, of Frank's Finest, on the defensive side and on the offensive line. These guys up front are going to be big. And another defensive end, TJ Fusco, Mars. This is a guy who's not talked about a lot, but he could be a stud on the defensive side of the ball. And to me, the breakout player for this team is Nick Rosaforte. This guy, the safety and running back, he is a missile as a safety. Big-time run defender at the safety spot. He also made some nice plays on the ball. And I got to wrap it up with my kicker, Nick Sedano, right? He was our Frank's finest kicker. You could tell, Mars, Carmel's got a lot of talent. My biggest question mark is they know they have talent. Can they be focused and humble? Do they have their eyes on the prize? There's going to be highs and lows in the season. Don't get too high. Don't get too low. Is this the opportunity that they see, and are they going to grind for that championship, which is grinding through the process? That's going to be the big question, Mars. Let's go to another team, and I'll let you talk because I did a lot already. Suffern, which is another surprise team in the spring, not to me, but a surprise team to others. They went 5-1 in 2020, had that big win against Carmel, against New Rochelle. And they've had back-to-back winning seasons for the first time since before 2004, Mars. So I thought the spring was a big year for the program. And they're returning some talent. Offensively, 5 of the 11 starters coming back, 2 out of the 5 on the offensive line. They are returning that quarterback, but they lose their stud in Lubin and a couple really solid offensive linemen in Janua, Lee, Newmeyer. But defensively, they're going to return about 6 or 7 of the starters. So, they still lose some leadership with Chow and Nipkin. But they are bringing back some guys, and Coach talked about not letting the success get to them. Take and get better one day at a time, which is a good mindset to have for the kids, right? Don't let, the spring is done. The spring is over. This is a new season. Some of the players, and to me, to replace Lubin is going to have to be a group effort, Mars. And it's going to start at the quarterback spot with Andre Risco. Coach talked about he's ready for a bigger role. He's a college baseball player, right? I thought he improved as the season went along. Another guy is going to be a big target, wide receiver and defensive back, Samson Joseph, who I really like watching this player. I think he's the breakout kid. 5'6", 130 pounds. He's just an electric guy. You want to get the ball in his hands because he is fast. He is track fast, and he's going to be a guy who, in the slot, making plays for them, and he is tough. I mean, he's active on both sides of the ball. One of my favorite guys, offensive lineman and defensive tackle, John Krebs, Frank's finest, one of the top offensive linemen in the Section 1. And on the defensive side, Mars, defensive end and tight end, Dylan Yang, 6'2", 230 pounds, another Frank's finest player, strong at the point of attack. He has that athleticism and length to cause disruption on the outside. And some of the other unknown guys who I think could be big players to me, Mars. Diamani Desir, the senior, inside linebacker and running back. This kid is raw, but he's a rangy linebacker. A Don Dorcello, outside linebacker. Another well-built kid at 6'1", 180. Quincy Harris, an underrated corner. I think this kid has good ball skills. And another guy to keep in mind, wide receiver and strong safety, Caleb Bullock. He's a junior, Mars. He's 6'3". He's son of Ramapo coach Keith Bullock. And they raved about the work that he has put in. I mentioned a lot of defenders, Mars, and you can get where I'm getting at. I think this defense can end up being pretty solid. And on the offensive, obviously the big question mark is replacing those guys on the offensive line, and who's going to fill that void for Lubin. There's not going to be one guy who does it. It's got to be a group effort, and I think it can go a long way with this defense being pretty solid. Mars, who do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about Carmel. I think that when you look at Carmel, this is a team that this is like their biggest chance to make the jump, and I think that when I say that, we kind of look at these projected starters, and it's kind of surprising. I mean, 10 of the 11 on the offense, all 5 of the offensive linemen projected would be returning as starters.
Yeah, guys who started or had major reps in the rotation.
And then you look at the defense, 8 of the 11. I think that this is going to be a very interesting Carmel team, and I think when Carmel's always had that grittiness to them. And the big thing, and you mentioned this already, is Carmel looking too highly of themselves, or are they gritty enough where it's like, hey, listen, we're a good team, but we need to win the chip.
I don't know if it's high, but like everyone's coming for you.
Yeah,
everyone's coming for you.
Everyone's coming for Carmel, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to be up to them to not only push harder than everyone's expectations are of them, but they need to elevate their skill level, elevate their expectations, so that they can say, hey, we're not settling for a playoff berth and maybe just getting to the section championship. Last year they didn't even have one, right? And it was definitely a surprise to see what Suffern was able to do to not only Carmel but also New Rochelle. And Carmel now needs to say, hey, listen, we need to show that we're the dominant team here. And they had a lot of young guys last year, which was, and first off, me and you both had picks against Carmel a lot of games in a row, and they were clearly proving us wrong. It felt like as if they were looking at.
It wasn't that many games.
Listen,
it was like 2 games.
Maybe me, on the other hand, I think at least 2 to 3 games where I thought, hey, Carmel, I think is not gonna win this game, and it felt like they watched the tape and they said, all right, Mars, we're gonna win the game just to spite you, and I think they have to come with that type of grittiness. Now,
and you know what it is, and you make a lot of good points. It's just stick with the program, stick with the little things that made you what you are today.
Yep.
Right, that's what's gonna make you a champion. Right, don't put too much pressure on yourself that everyone's coming for us and that I have to be perfect. Do what got you here.
Exactly.
Right? And that's following the program.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Let's go to another Let's go to another team, okay? Arlington, Mars, in 2020, 4-2, coached by Coach Morano. And, he's had a lot of success since he's taken over the program in 2016, Mars. He's had 3 7-win seasons over the last 5 years, and he hasn't been under 500. I mean, again, Arlington is a big school. They have a lot of kids that go through that program, but Coach Morano has done a good job over there. And Coach talked about they are young, they're inexperienced, but they want to compete for a league title. And this is a tough league to win a title in, so it's going to be a challenge. But if you look at the players coming back offensively, 6 of the 11 projected starters, 3 on the offensive line, which is going to be big. They do have to replace their quarterback. They lose their quarterback. They lose running back Grant, who was really solid for them, and guys like Finn and Gibson. And on the defensive side is probably where the biggest turnover is going to be. 4 to the 11 projected back, and you lose guys like Tommy Gibson, Richie Finn, who are big-time players for that defense. But on the players to watch, I think up front they could be strong. And it starts out on the offensive line with Colin Cubberly, the sophomore. This kid's 6'5", 270 pounds, smooth player, leader on the team, captain. I think this is a year that this guy really pops off. And then a couple other guys, defensive tackle and offensive lineman Isaiah Weathers, another Frank's finest. He was a bull at defensive tackle and nose guard. Really strong guy, plays with a real nice effort. And another guy, Jake Pascocello. This guy's a two-way lineman. Right, and he was a guy who made a bunch of plays on the defensive side of the ball as well. So you can see they have 3 solid offensive linemen. Who replaces the other 2 is going to be a question. Some of the other guys, Brad Nieves, could he fill that void on both sides of the ball that Richie Finn left? He plays running back. He plays linebacker. He's going to be an important role for this guy, but he is a talented young man. And another guy, Ian Griffin, 6'1", 180 pounds. He's just an athlete. He can move around in multiple spots, which to me, this is a player who could be a breakout guy for this team. They are bringing back a defensive back in Aiden Chaffee, the junior, which Coach talked about, who had a good summer. But I'm looking at the quarterback battle, Mars. 2 quarterbacks. Dean Muhammad, the senior, and because we're Maypac guys, we know a Muhammad teacher who was back in the day, so shout out to him and his son. I hope they're related. I think they are. But Dean is a senior coming back. He was the backup for the quarterback in the spring. And he's battling up against Michael Resigno, who is son of the offensive coordinator, Mike Resigno, who's a longtime Yorktown coach. So real interesting battle. Both kids bring different aspects to the table. And to me, the biggest question mark is that quarterback battle and this passing attack, which Coach talked about. They want to be more efficient in the passing game. But I think in the trenches, Mars, they could be pretty strong. Let's go to another team, North Rockland. And this is the last team in League B. And in 2020 was a struggle. They went 1-4. Offensively, they're not the normal-looking North Rockland team. They went into the spread looks a lot, and I think that they're going to continue to do that. But what I guess would be probably the most disappointing, knowing Coach Lynch, who's a big defensive guy, was the defense. They were ranked 12th out of 14 on defense and points allowed. And I didn't get to speak to him, but I know that probably bothers him, and he wants to have that corrected. Looking at the guys coming back, you do lose some good players in Mena, Carswell, Rodriguez. You lose Kresbeck. These are guys that are going to be tough to replace, but I do think they're bringing back some talent. And it starts, to me, defensive tackle, tight end, fullback. You can move around a bunch of spots. Lennon Fulgenico are Frank's finest on the defensive line. This guy is a bull, high-energy guy who made a lot of plays on the defense. 6'3", 250, big kid. Wide receiver and defensive back Greg Becker. He was a guy who could be a breakout player. I thought he was a really reliable target on offense. And he was a shifty guy out of the slot, and he's going to be he's going to have to be one again this year. And I'm looking at running back and outside linebacker Zay Frazier. He ran the ball for them last year out of the spread. He ran routes out of the slot and caught the ball. This was a pretty versatile offensive weapon, and I think he could be that again. And then you look at other guys, right? Running back and outside linebacker Brian Hernandez, the junior. He got outside linebacker reps. Christoph Lee, wide receiver and corner. The defensive end, Chase Patterson. He had some nice plays against Arlington. And then you talk about Sebastian Farrar. They're bringing back some guys who got some rotational reps. And Sebastian was a deep safety. I think he has solid size and speed. This is a guy who can make some plays in the back end. And Danny Rivera, linebacker, he's one of their leading tacklers coming back. So they're bringing back some talent. The big question to me is at the quarterback spot and offensive line. How are they going to replace some of the guys that they lost? But I do think this defense could be definitely improved with those guys that I mentioned coming back. Mars, who do you want to talk about?
I'm going to talk about Arlington. I mean, firstly, I got to say, before Coach Morano had arrived, Arlington really struggled, and they
had winning, and they had a few years of winning. Then they had a down year, a few years winning, down year. But again, 3 7-win seasons.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing.
Out of the last 5 years,
they struggled to find consistency.
Yeah,
and it just feels that I feel like when you looked at when Coach Morano had first arrived, they have this new feeling of like a winning.
We're going to be there every year.
Yeah, we're going to be a team that's competitive every single year. We're always in the talk of being one of the top teams in 1AA, and I think that's already a big thing you can say about this program. It's definitely changed. And when you look at now this team in general, the projected starters, 6 out of the 11 on the offense, 3 out of the 5 on the offensive line, and 4 out of the 11 on defense, it seems like a pretty solid return rate. And I think that when you look at that, Arlington has a lot of those key players that, specifically a lot of Frank's finest guys like Colin Cumberly on the offensive line, Isaiah Weathers on the defensive line, offensive line. You have these guys that are going to be such important figures on this team, right? If they perform well and they continue to improve and even get better as the season progresses, this could be a very deadly team, right? I think that they could be a team that will control the clock, and I think that's going to be something that's important, especially with how Arlington's one of those teams that's just naturally just big human beings on the squad. So I think that having that available to them is going to be a very important thing to watch for the season.
Absolutely. And let's move to League C, Mars, and let's start with Austin, who actually played a game tonight. They did lose to Horace Greeley, coached by Larry McRae. And usually this time around they're doing scrimmages, but there are a couple games, 0 games. In 2020, March, they went 4-1. They won the Independent League, the big teams in the Independent League title. They moved back into AA, and Coach talked about looking to build this program and momentum, see if he can carry this momentum into AA. I know they had that tough loss today, but they brought back some players from that team. Mars, 8 of the 11 on the offense. 3 out of 5 on that offensive line. You lose a guy like Liam Hamilton on the offensive line, but they're bringing back some guys, and defensively 10 of the 11. They were a young team. They're trying to build it up and compete in AA. And some of the players to watch, Vinny Bernardo to me starts off at linebacker, offensive lineman. This guy's a Frank Finest, anchors this defense. And another guy, running back and linebacker, Terrell Francis. He's the bell cow on this offense. He can wear down a defense, and this rush attack is going to be big. So they got to focus in on running the ball and playing good defense. And another guy, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, Nicholas Cruz, 6'3", 285 pounds, big-bodied kid. And how about quarterback and defensive back Nick Gallery Jr.? He scored a nice touchdown today. This guy's an active DB, right? Moving to the quarterback spot. Solid athlete that he can do that play action. He can run. He could be that dual threat guy. And then a couple other guys, Jerry Medina, the junior. Young defender as a defensive back, had a couple INTs, 5'7" kid, scrappy kid. And then finally Justin Santos, who on the defensive line and tight end, 6'3", 195 pounds. He was disruptive against Mount Vernon and Poughkeepsie. I thought he played pretty solid. Again, I'm going to go back and watch the tape. Again, we designed the show before the game was played, and they played a game, so I'm definitely going to watch back on them. But those are some of the kids that I would definitely focus in on. And how about John J. East Fishkill? Again, we're in League C. East Fishkill was kind of pulled out of this division into C. They were 3-2 in 2020. Before the COVID year, March, they had 6 or more wins in 7 straight seasons. They've had a winning season every year since 2005. So you're talking about a program, one of those really consistent programs, and this is going to be a really young group. Coach talked about he wants to see them grow every day. Players coming back, March, 2 out of the 11 on the offensive side, only 1 out of the 5 offensive linemen. Quarterback, they have to replace. On the defensive side, 2 out of the 11 starters come back, and they lose guys like Whalen, Kahowitz, Holtz. Whalen was a really underrated player for them, so that's a big loss on defense. But some of the guys to look out for starts with Mason Payton, defensive back and wide receiver, multi-year varsity guy, 6'3", good straight line speed. So he's going to be a big, deep target for them. But on the defensive side, an active guy who can play against bigger receivers and run with some smaller ones. He's going to be a big, important player. And quarterback Jake Vanderhoff, all right? He threw 2 touchdowns versus Brave on the last game he started. This is going to be a guy who's going to have to take that role at the quarterback spot. Junior, young guy. Another guy who got some rotation, Quinn Griffiths, 6'2", 180 pounds on the defensive end side. And a couple guys to keep in mind. Martin Martini, he's a wide receiver, outside linebacker, junior, 6'1". I think he could be a breakout player. He was a young guy, got some limited reps, but made some plays out on the edge. And Connor Stroh, another guy, he was on specials a bunch of times. He's going to have to pick up a bigger role, Mars. To me, the biggest question mark, offensive and defensive line, they lost a boatload of guys. But if you know East Fishkill, there's something in the water over there that they keep producing big guys up front. So I imagine they will be big, but it's a big question mark on experience. They don't have any. What to watch for? I think this offense could look pretty solid if they get that offensive line squared away. Marsh, who do you want to talk about?
We'll talk about John Jay's Fishkill, and I can agree with you that this team is going to be definitely a young team walking in, and I think it's because of the fact you look at their projected starters, and it's very, very low compared to a lot of the other teams that they're competing against. I mean, one of the most alarming things here is going to be the offensive line at 1 of the 5 is returning, and I think that kind of I would agree with you is some of the biggest things you should keep an eye on: offensive line and defensive line. Can their front really, really control the line of scrimmage, right? That's kind of what I was looking to say, and I think that if they can, then it allows for John Jay to really do what they always like to do, which is really pound the rock and really control the pace of the game, right? And if they can do that, then I think that this could be a John Jay team that kind of does the same thing they've always done, which was, control the game pacing and win games in a very quick manner, right? And I think that they will take leads and then they'll wear out their opponent and then, chip away at them. And I think that's what they need to focus on. Try to develop that offensive line, defensive line, and I think that it should be interesting to see. And like you said, offensive line, usually John Jay always has these massive people. So I think that they'll always find someone to plug into those spots.
Yeah, and let's go to the next team, RC Ketchum, coached by Coach Hogan, 2020, 1-4. Again, a bit of a struggle. Coach talked about they're going to be, have some inexperience. They got to replace a bunch of starters, but they are returning 20 kids that came from the spring. And Coach made it clear, the fight is for a playoff spot. That's what they want to go after. And I do think they are bringing some weapons offensively. Starters back 7 of the 11 on offense, so that's a pretty good amount. On the offensive line, 3 out of the 5. And they're bringing back a quarterback who got significant reps. But you do lose Warner and you do lose Vanderline, who were both big-time players for them. On defense, though, that's where there's going to be more turnover. 4 out of the 11 guys returning. You lose Saginario. You lose Clark. There are some guys you have to replace defensively, but I do think they have some talent, right? Starts with safety and tight end John Capo. Frank's finest at the safety spot. He could really be a defensive anchor for this team at 6 feet, 190 pounds. Another guy, defensive tackle and offensive tackle, Eric Nunez, 6'7" Mars, 300 pounds, a mountain of a man. Had some really wow plays on tape. And if he can get more consistent, he could be a dominant force for this team. Another guy, Johnny Gonzalez on the offensive line, another guy returning. He started games at center. He's going to be another guy who adds to this offensive line to try to help that rush attack, which is, again, that double wing. So you need good offensive line play for that double wing to work. So it's going to be big for those guys. Another guy, Avon Owens. I like the work over the spring and summer that he put in, and that the coaches say. And then a couple other guys, even Ivan Carvalho. There's another 5'8" kid. Coach talked about the work he has put in. And at the quarterback spot, Sean Camacho, quick, slippery, and he could be an explosive football player. So he's that guy, again, in the double wing. The quarterback has to be involved in the run game, and he is that guy who can do the play action, who can roll out. And if he can be more consistent, not a tall guy, but if you can get him into some space, he can make some plays for you. Let's go to another team, Mars, Fox Lane. And it's coached by Andrew Gugliano. His first season. In 2020, they went 1-4. Coach is replacing longtime coach, Coach Bragi. And, Coach talked about what kind of the mindset is. It's win the first game and compete for the league. I mean, he set a high standard. He knows it's going to be you're going to have to build this up. But he thinks he has some talent. And offensively, they want to be a smash-mouth football team. Defensively, they want to be simple and play fast. He made no qualms about it. And the players they're bringing back, Mars, 6 out of the 11 on the offensive side of the ball. 3 out of the 5 on the offensive line. They are bringing back their quarterback. Now they lose Horvath, they lose Olsen, which are big losses. Defensive side, 6 out of the 11. So they're bringing back some guys. But they did lose out on Luca Friedman, who's one of the better players in Section 1AA. And one of the players that has really intrigued me when you look at the players coming back is their safety. And they call him an athlete on the offense because he can do a bunch of different things. Noah Bernero, who was a transfer back from Stepanak, I believe. He was there as a sophomore. And he's back. And this kid's 6 feet, 185 pounds. Really, really good athlete. Can make a lot of plays on both sides of the ball and just be a weapon. Another guy, wide receiver and cornerback, Logan Matson. 3-sport athlete, really reliable target, really solid be man-to-man coverage. They have some weapons out there with those two guys. On the offensive line, you look at Will Hoyt, right? You like coach liked the work that he's put in during the summer. A linebacker and tight end, Will Shepard, is coming back, who was a very active player. But I'm looking at this quarterback battle, Mars, and there is a quarterback battle between two guys, Eric Miller and Jack Travis. Eric Miller is that big body kid at 6'2", but Jack Travis is that speedy guy, so they add different dynamics to each other. So I'm interested to see who wins that quarterback battle. Mars, who do you want to talk about?
Talk about RCK. I think RCK is an interesting situation because of the fact that they have a lot of returners in the offensive line and on the offense in general. 7 out of the 11 and 3 out of 5 for the offensive line. And I really think that RCK is in a spot where they struggled last season, but before the spring season they're being very competitive in my eyes, and I felt as if they have a grittiness to them, and I think that they need to kind of build alongside their offensive line, and they need to try to allow their playmakers to make plays. And I think it's going to be a tough going, but I think that they have the pieces that allows them to do so. And I think the offensive line is going to be the most important thing they need to make sure is developed, and it needs to be, the chemistry needs to be on point. And I think as long as they have that, then I think they should be doing okay.
Yeah. Let's go to the final two teams, Mars. Let's talk about White Plains. And 2020, they went 2-4. Coach talked about, hey, they want the team to focus, don't be a distraction, do your job, and get back into the winning ways. And they were explosive on offense, but again, they were ranked 4th in the spring, and they're bringing back some guys. And to me, probably the biggest thing they want to clean up is on the defensive side of the ball. But you look on the offensive side, Mars, they're bringing back 8 of the 11 starters, 3 out of the 5 on the offensive line. They're bringing back their quarterback. Obviously, they lose a stud in McGuire and Englert, but they are bringing back some weapons. Defensively, 6 out of the 11. But you look at the guys coming back, start with the quarterback, Jay Biondi, my Frank's finest quarterback, really solid touch. Again, a guy who can sling it deep. He can make some plays. He can roll out, again, he made some plays in the red zone. He rolled out to his right. And then obviously a couple wideouts. Eli Pierre, Frank's finest. This guy could be wide receiver, could be running back. You can move him out wide in the slot. This kid is a good football player at 6'2", 195 pounds. And Danny LaSalle, who is a really reliable target, 6'3", 180 pounds at wide receiver, another Frank's finest. A guy to keep in mind, though, is wide receiver and outside linebacker Nick Spista. And this guy is a versatile player, and he's very active on defense. He's going to be a big, important player to me. And to finally wrap it off, let's get to alignment. Nick Pascalini. They talk about his offensive line, defensive line. They think he's the best defensive lineman, and he's a respected man on this team. And finally, to round it all off, Mars, let's go to the other team, Portchester. And again, 2020 struggle. Right, 1-5 is one of those teams, still suffering the effects of COVID, and that's because of the participation in the numbers. And Coach talks about trying to build this program back up, and it was a tough year for them. They run the triple option offense. They're going to be young, inexperienced, and they just want to get 1% better each day, and I like that line. You get 1% better each day. And if you look at the players coming back offensively, 4 of the 11 coming back, 3 out of the 5 on the offensive line. Defensively, no starters coming back. So again, a lot of people to replace. And you look at some of the players, to me it starts at quarterback and outside linebacker Danny Hins, reliable defender. He was really active. Could he win that quarterback job? And Colin Taylor could play quarterback, running back, defensive back. He's probably their best athlete, 5'11", 175 pounds, a junior. And then a couple of linemen. I look at Anthony Del Vecchio, big kid, put in a lot of work, and Alejandro Leyva, not a very big guy, but a tough guy, scrappy blocker. So those two guys on the offensive line are going to be big. My biggest question mark is this defense. Mark, you got to replace 11 starters. How do you do that? But I think this team, and I want to see them show some fight. this season, and I think they will for their coach and for this program and try to build in the right direction. Mars, who do you want to talk about?
I'll talk about White Plains. I think this is going to be one of their better teams they've had in a few years, and I think it has to do a lot with their offense. Obviously, a lot of returning players, and it's going to be based on the performance of not only Jay Biondi, but also going to be about their playmakers like Danny Lascelles and Eli Pierre, right? I think those are going to be the guys that we key in on, and I think Eli Pierre is one of those really talented players that we've been raving about since last year, and he's earned every single ounce of praise, and I think that he's going to be a guy that is definitely going to be a key factor to a winning season in general. I think the White Plains is going to be a very interesting team this year. They haven't had a big time. In 2019, they were 7-2, which was great. And they not too long ago, interestingly enough, my senior year, they win the section title. So they do get a plethora of talent in White Plains. And it feels like this is one of those years that they have a good string of talent, and I want to see what they do with that talent. So it should be an interesting year for sure.
And that was all the teams. A lot of teams we went through, a lot of players we talked about. Now let's go to our bold predictions, Mars. And I'm going to give my bold predictions, and you're going to buy or sell each one of them. We'll go we'll go every one this time, different from the last video. But first things first, my first one is White Plains is going to have a top 2 offense in points scored in 1AA, and that's one going to be my first bold take. Mars, are you buying or selling it? Top 2. I'm going to be top 2. 1 or 2.
I think I'm going to sell that one. Okay. I'm going to sell that because I think Carmel is going to be the top scoring offense. And I think the second team is either going to be a surprise. I think it's going to be something like Arlington. I think Arlington has like this grittiness to them that the offensive line is going to be a driving force for them. And I just think that I'm making bold predictions with Arlington. I just think that the White Plains will be the 3rd best offense, and I think that's the reason why they won't make that top 2. If I'm completely wrong against Arlington, it could be another team. It could be even
That's fine. You're just selling it. You just said I'm just thinking you don't have to pick it. You could just buy it or sell it. My second bold take, I'm going Carmel will have a top 2 defense in points allowed this season in 1AA. Buy or sell?
I think this might be a sell as well. And not because I don't think Carmel's a top tier defense. I just think that if you look at the schedule that they're going to have, they're going to play against the top tier teams in all of AA. And I think that if they were in one of the other divisions or leagues, I think they would have a better chance at being the top 2, especially when you're just counting the regular season. I think that when you look at this, I can see, in general, I think New Rochelle might have one of the top defenses because of the fact that they've always had a top defense, and I think they're in a less, it's more spread out division compared to the others. And then I think you could even go.
You don't got to pick them. I'm
just thinking to myself. I think you can see if depends on how John Jay does. But I think that
they're gonna be young, man.
I know, but I just think that Carmel might be similar to White Plains. They might be like the 3rd best defensive scoring. Just because I think they'll have a great defense. I just think that they're playing against a lot of top tier teams that will score.
Well, we'll see. Tough. We will see. My next 3rd one. Scarsdale and Suffern are going to break their playoff droughts this year. It's been 4 years since Scarsdale has made the playoff, and Suffern hasn't made the playoff since 2015. Both will make the playoffs in 1AA this fall. Buy or sell it? It's my bold prediction.
I'll buy this one. I think that Scarsdale was a team that I already said I think will make the playoffs in their division. The debate I had with myself just now was Suffern. And the reason why is because that division is so ripened with a lot of top tier teams, and I think it really is going to depend on their veteran presence. They lost Klebmer Lubin, which is such a big loss. I just think that if they can do that, they could be the 4th team that squeaks in my opinion. I think that
I'd be right,
and that would still be a buy there.
My final one: Carmel's going to win the Section 1AA title. I think it happens. I think it is their time if they could stay focused. Obviously, health is a big concern, but I do think they will reach the top of the mountain. And it's kind of a 2-parter. I'm going to put in a little extra. I think Carmel's going to win the 1AA title. I think New Rochelle makes it to the Final Four. They are not a dead team. They're not a team that is going to fall or collapse, based on some things you hear. But are you buying or selling Carmel winning the section title?
it's very interesting to say, and it's a tough debate because you have a lot of good teams in this league, and it's been all over the place, right?
It's been Nershell.
I meant
five straight years.
It was all over the place, right? Everyone thought Nershell.
Yeah,
and
but again,
even like
section
let's
title.
say, look at the top 3 teams, right? The top 3 teams in the past few years. I mean, Carmel's recently has been a top tier team recently, and Nershell's always kind of
they've won Neuro.
Had
it's really been is Neuro gonna get knocked off?
That's
because they've won 5 straight section titles.
And my mindset.
Are you buying or selling it?
My mindset here is that I'm going to buy that. I think Carmel's going to win Section 1 AA championships, and I think it's going to be a very momentous occasion. And I think it's going to shock the waves of Section 1 that the Carmel Rams are going to be the ones that win the championship, and it would be very surprising. Not so surprising because they've been a top tier team recently, but it would be definitely a very rare sight to see.
You heard it here first.
Yep.
All right, everyone, that was our show. We appreciate everyone for tuning in. We hope you have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you all very soon.